Activating combat mode.
Hi, this is the second part of a larger video on the Final Fantasy VII house. Once all 7 parts are complete, I will stitch them all together into one mega video. But for now, if you're watching this version, there is a part 1 that you will probably need to watch in order to not be completely confused. So please watch that right here. It should be in the little info card. Thank you. At this point, Jennifer Cornet in particular seems to be quite the interesting person. This begs the question, why is she the way she is? No one can know for sure, but we actually do know some rumblings on her past. Icarus' website actually has this bio Jen wrote about herself. Maybe this will give us some sort of glimpse into the workings of her mind?
I keep reading the entries on my friends list, and everyone has normal seeming lives. I almost don't want to write about mine because it seems so stupid and unbelievable and weird. I don't know what to say anymore. I mean, I don't talk about this normally, and LiveJournal is supposed to be a place to vent. But I'm self-conscious, even here. Hi, my name is Jen, and I help rehabilitate vampires and assist in spiritual awakenings. I also take care of metaphysical emergencies and, oh yeah, I do exorcisms and banishings too. I'm quite versed in ancient ritual, and I often use my own blood to seal spells. I'm not Catholic, but I'm not Wiccan. God talks to me and tells me that the end of the world is at hand, she says. I'm married to Metatron, and, oh yes, I'm the physical embodiment of the angel Uriel. In past lives, I've been Integra Van Helsing, Sephiroth, and Delandu Albatau, amongst others. I've been to many therapists, but they all keep telling me that I'm okay. Aside from Catholic priests wanting to exorcise my house and my husband, things are pretty normal. Unless you count having 20-some kids live in the mental realm that my husband and I share as not normal. I sword fight and sing and play the harp and get into fights with real-life Iscariots. And I have 3 people on this earth that would lay down and die for me. Oh, they're angels too. I'm a horrible bitch and feared in several parts of the galaxy, and in Vatican City. All my past selves live in my head as well, and I can summon them up when I need them. I don't slay vampires, I hunt them. Slayer, one who kills vampires, often indiscriminately to purify the earth. Example, Buffy Summers. Hunter, one who studies vampires, hunts them down and wrings information from them. Seldom killing unless it's necessary for a community and/or family, often referred to as a watcher. Example, Abraham Van Helsing. I am trained with the sword, the staff, the longbow, the crossbow, throwing daggers, and the most deadly of all, the towel. I play the harp, the piano, the pipe organ, several woodwinds, and I'm learning bodhran. Violin is next. I sing, I do Celtic, modern, ritual, and sword dancing, and I'm training to be the next soprano sorceress. Famous people I'm related to: Finn McCool, Morgan Le Fay, and Bram Stoker. And when I was a little girl, I told everyone at the HEX high school that I was in for 2 months that I was related to Joey Lawrence. Don't ask me why. I've been asked if I was Jennifer Lopez. No clue about that one. And I'm known at Disneyland as Indiana Jen, the girl who gives temple tours for free because tourists are always getting lost. I can't go to Hollywood because I get chased by people who think that I'm famous. Goddamn advice. Walk like you own the place. Given to me by a security guard who let me on the set of Anaconda. A particularly craptacular movie, or so I've heard. If you've seen it, you know that big waterfall? Yep, I was on top of that. And that old riverboat. I think I'm particularly ugly and unlikable. I'm not sure why people like me, but some seem to. I have no father, and my mother isn't human. My crazy Uncle Michael works for MI5, and my guy best friend was created in a super secret laboratory in Glendale, California, and born in the same hospital I was in Pasadena, which leads us both to believe that I might be part of the same project. My husband, by the way, besides being Metatron, is also a no-life king. Not a Nosferatu, no, but an Ektros. And a mad scientist. And an emperor. And a priest. Oh, and another confession? I'm Enrico Maxwell. That's right, I'm a twitching bi-shonen jerk of a priest. Now, little boy, do you want to confess to me? Rip Van Winkle, aka River Millennium, aka Ravina Josephine Kratzenberg? She's my disassociated sex drive. If you want to flirt with me, message her, because sex, to me, is unnecessary and useful only for breeding purposes. Unless you catch me on the right day and you're an Iscariot, and then, well, a little demon talk, some red wine, and you can probably sack me. So there you go, a little sum up of me. Call me crazy, call me nuts, run away from me, or vice versa. I really want these panic attacks to go away. And sleep would be nice. While I'm at it, I wish I had a pony.
Okay, well, that didn't help. At least not with her past. It did, however, show us exactly what kind of person we're dealing with. She's had a long history of being one to brag about how cool or mysterious or whatever she is, and believing the unbelievable. Not uncommon for a kid. I saw this type of person in high school all the time, but the weird thing here is that she never really grew out of this. Icarus' story took place when she was 20. Okay, enough beating around the smelly bush. We actually do know a little bit about Jen Cornet's past prior to Icarus' stay, so I guess let's go chronologically. Jen was born on February 18th, 1982 to her parents Mona and Chris. The family on Chris's side had owned a five and dime store on the West Coast back in the olden days, and had earned quite a pretty penny from it. Later, Jen would brag about having a family fortune coming to her, and this is probably what she's talking about. Mona, Jen's mother, ran away from an abusive home in her mid-teens to escape to the magical land of Hollywood. Once there, she began attending Hollywood High School, and there she met Chris, Jen's eventual father. Jen grew up in Arcadia, California. She loved going to Disneyland, particularly the Indiana Jones ride, as we heard earlier. She had a mostly normal childhood, but as time went on, her parents fought more and more. When she was only 10 years old, they had a divorce. It doesn't seem to have been super messy, like the two remained as cordial as they possibly could have, but it did result in Jen's parents living in different states. Jen mostly stayed back in California with her dad, while her mother moved to a small community in Oregon. For the next few years, everything remained okay. However, come high school, she started to act out. Later, she'd brag about all the trouble she got up to in these days, and the only thing we really know about in particular is that she allegedly dated an older boy as a freshman and had sex in a limo on the way to prom. For her behavior, which I'm sure involved way more than those two examples, she was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder as a child, which sounds completely fabricated, but is, in fact, quite real. Yeah, sorry, I got diagnosed with I don't listen to authority disorder. Anyway, because of this behavior, her parents began researching boot camps and other behavioral boarding schools to send her to. This leads them to decide on Cross Creek Residential Treatment Center in Laverkin, Utah. One night, Jen is woken up abruptly. People showed up in her bedroom and brought her into a van. They haul her off in the middle of the night to a boarding school in Utah. Once there, she is immediately made to take a cold shower. Jen endures quite a bit of trauma here, but the details are uncertain. It's obvious that a lot of this stuff is the kind of thing that people wouldn't really want to talk about. It is known that they withheld food and prevented new students from being friends to break their will. Kids were also thrown into small locked rooms as punishment quite frequently. The place of this particular facility was so far from civilization that escaping would mean, quote, taking your life into your own hands. As mentioned before, Jen's parents were looking for a boarding school to send her to fix her behavior, and Cross Creek seemed like the best option for them. The thing is, Cross Creek and many of the facilities owned but operated by the Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs and Schools are today quite known for its history of alleged child abuse and general poor conditions. The exact extent of which I won't go into myself, as that's another video made by a much less silly YouTuber, but the point is, whatever Jen went through here, it wasn't pretty. There was one good thing to come out of that time though, and it was meeting Cayla. Cayla was another young girl forced into staying at Cross Creek, this time for being gay! The two got along quite well, since Cayla was, quote, that crazy girl who thought she was an alien, and that went hand in hand with that crazy girl who thinks she's a vampire. However, their time was cut short, because when Jen turned 18, she got out of that godforsaken school as soon as she could, and Cayla would end up staying there for another 2 years. On Jen's 18th birthday, she immediately informs the staff that she no longer wishes to be there, and seemingly just like that, they send her home. However, home is different, because her parents both moved to different places since the divorce. Jen goes to her mother's new place in Applegate, Oregon. Her mother was absolutely horrified when she found out about what happened at Cross Creek. Jen settled nicely into her new life in Oregon. It beat that hell house in Utah, that's for sure. She even got a job at the flower shop, which made her feel like Aerith. While all this is going on, it's the olden days of the internet, in the ancient time of 1999. There was a person named Theo. Theo had just played Final Fantasy VII and fell in love with it, immersing themselves in the online fandom. They drew fan art, wrote fan fiction, and chatted on forums. Theo was particularly a fan of one character, Hojo. Theo really connected with Hojo in a way that helped them figure out their gender identity.
Hojo was much less a character from a video game to me than he was a symbol of my personal freedom before he became associated with Jen's otherkin trap. He was also a symbol of my introductory journey into maturity. He was a crazy font of inspiration and a way to kind of wiggle my way into thought spaces where I could briefly imagine myself as a man who didn't have to care about the feelings of others, which was diametrically the opposite of my experience IRL of having to play a femme people pleaser whether it was healthy or not. What I got out of it was I was able to balance out how absolutely powerless the real world always left me feeling.
Hojo was a genuinely important character to Theo, and they continued to share their passion online. The works also served as a means to vent and work through their own problems through the lens of a fictional character. In the game, Hojo is an evil scientist who, did some bad things. He didn't care much for life as long as it was in the way of his research. He experimented on people, tried to crossbreed a dog with a hippie girl, all that kind of stuff. But he had a frankly fascinating backstory, intertwined with Sephiroth and Vincent's. I don't want to delve too much, but the point is, there's some depth there, and Theo's work filled a niche, and got them quite a bit of attention at that. Starting to sound familiar, isn't it? Eventually, Theo makes a certain online friend, being none other than Jack. Jack had never played FF7 before, but of course this would change. At this point, Jack was a dedicated college student, figuring out his queer identity and hanging out with Icarus. During this particular school year, he met Theo, and unbeknownst to either of them, this set off the domino reaction that followed his entire life. Theo admired Jack quite a bit for his college education, openness about his queer identity, and generally how put together he was for his age. Theo was beginning to grow distant from their older best friend, so Jack quickly filled the hole in their heart. Theo, Jack, and Eris had become an unbreakable trio of friends. Their friendship was mostly online, but Eris was actually able to hang out with Jack a few times in person. It's mentioned briefly in Theo's account that Eris had been writing essays online about soul bonding. I will go into much more detail about that during a dedicated Eris section, but I find it fascinating how early this popped up in the group. Anyway, time goes on and Jack finally plays Final Fantasy VII. As expected, he falls in absolute love with the game and grows particularly attached to Hojo, just like Theo. He was so attached to the character that he published a fan shrine dedicated to him, Hojo.org. The very same Hojo.org that connected Icarus with the group. A while back, Theo wrote one particular Hojo fanfic about him getting a new body and undergoing a redemption arc. Jack posts this story onto his site, and this leads to it becoming fairly popular within the fandom. Then, Jack receives an email. It was from a girl named Jennifer Cornet. Jen had seen Theo's fic on Jack's site, and mistakenly thinking Jack wrote it, gushed and gushed to him non-stop about how much she loved the story. She said that every part of the fic lined up perfectly with her own life, as if it was written about her. Jack forwards the message to Theo, as he wasn't about to take credit for his friend's work, and Theo was taken aback by the praise. Despite this, she yaps on and on about herself. She talks about her ex, her feelings, and all sorts of personal details that'd be quite a lot to put on someone you just met. Theo initially elects to ignore the email, given the immediate gut spewing, but does respond eventually. It was clear to Jen, however, that Theo wasn't about to entertain all of her wacky antics, so she shifts her focus right back to Jack. And focus she did. Jen chatted with Jack all day, every single day. Jack was just fascinated by her, and just like that, he was sucked into her orbit. And all of a sudden, Jen was part of the group, right there with Theo and Eris. Now, I mentioned before that Eris was into her world of soul bonding stuff at this time, but it was simply something she was passionate about and believed in. There was no cult of her own or anything like that. But then here comes Jen, who introduced herself to the group by saying how connected she was to this fictional story about Hojo and how it reflected her life perfectly. Comes in and obviously goes the opposite direction. If you don't believe you're a reincarnation of a Final Fantasy character, you're cruel and could possibly be doing things to hurt your soul bond and whatnot. And so, just as suddenly as she appeared, Jen became the new soul bonding expert. She appropriated a lot of her soul bonding stuff directly from Eris, and yet still acted like a higher authority on the concept. She also tended to use it less as a creative outlet, or a method of self-exploration, and more to control people, in particular, Jack. She would also use it almost exclusively to feed her wants and needs. This started Eris's feud with her. I theorize Eris also started fighting with Jen because she doesn't think that she actually believed in soul bonding. Like, again, using it to control those around her, much like a cult leader. I have no proof of that, it's just... makes sense. Jen's soul bonding lectures began to get to Theo, to the point where they felt like they couldn't portray the brutal themes they had previously portrayed in their fanfics. Such an act went from simple venting to now full-on self-harm, and so they simply stopped venting through fics. Just kept all that anger and sadness deep down inside. Suffered in silence, without an outlet. Jen goes on to assign characters to everybody. She was Genova, Eris was Aerith, duh, and Jack was Hojo. She didn't agree with the existence of doubles, meaning despite him being a very important character to them, Hojo was denied to Theo. Theo was slightly jealous of Jack for being Hojo, but Jen reassures them that they are someone, they just need to find out who that someone is. Theo relents as they care deeply about Jack, more so than Jen, and Jen did not like this fact, as she loves being the center of attention. Jen was really coming into her own. She had an escape from her family, whom she would constantly complain about. She would talk to Jack and the others about her constant suicidal thoughts, but for now, she had her friends, and she had her Final Fantasy other life. Things could be getting better, even if she is controlling. Meanwhile, back with Jack, he's still attending Penn State. In a mythology class, he met a new friend, Marley, who, if you remember, was the surly mentor that Icarus had met. Jack, Marley, and their mutual friend Erica were another unbreakable trio of friends, hanging out and making memories. Between classes, they'd grab lunch and watch The Price is Right, so, you know, it's real shit. One thing Marley and Jack bonded over was, of course, Final Fantasy VII, but Jack was definitely more into it than they were. But of course, soon Jack began telling Marley about his belief in soul bonding. They thought nothing of it, thinking it was harmless role-playing. Jack never pressured Marley to share these beliefs, so all was good. This was when Jack still identified as female, and Marley believes that soul bonding at this stage was a way for him to explore his gender identity freely. They also became aware that Jack engaged in a lot of online communities, and met a number of his online friends, one being Eris. Marley could not fucking get along with Eris. They believed that she had a way of bending people to her beliefs, and that the two were just both stubborn. While Jack never pushed Marley into the soul bonding beliefs, they felt as though Eris did. Realizing she couldn't get too much further in, like, forcing these beliefs onto them, Eris eventually just made sure to steer clear of Marley altogether. The other online friend was, of course, Jen, and it wouldn't take too long for them to step up from just being friends. When Jen and Jack started talking again in 2000, the two officially became a long-distance couple. However, Jen didn't seem exactly loyal. In December of 2000, a lad by the name of Nate had a friend lend him his copy of Final Fantasy VIII, and he got really into it. Wanting to engage in more of the online fandom, Nate frequents the classic fan site, Eyes on Final Fantasy. He often used the site's IRC chat room to meet other people who also like the series, and there he would meet Jen. She wanted to RP Final Fantasy VII with him often. Nate didn't really know anything about 7, so she info dumped and caught him up to speed as they went. He became really interested in getting to know Jen, because she was a girl who actually talked to him, and that was pretty cool. Hey, he was 16, and that's how 16-year-olds think. And so they would IM and RP together as time went on. Some nights they'd leave the online chat and then start talking on the phone. They talked for hours, well into the early morning. Sometimes Jen's mother, Mona, would even come on the phone and talk with Nate, and even they would enjoy having conversations. Nate says that they were very mature conversations for his age, and that Mona said that he was a grounding influence to Jen. Jen tells Nate about Cross Creek. Whenever she does, she obviously still knows it was a horrible, abusive situation, but she had complete accountability on the reason why she was sent there. She never said her parents were abusive, and fully understand that she was a bad kid, both in large contrast to what she would later say when retelling these events. Jen and Nate's relationship gradually became more and more romantic as the chats continued. Nate seemed to be the only person who could talk to her and be there for her as much as she wanted, and she liked that in him. He didn't have many obligations, so he was always available most of the time. But then, almost as soon as she and Nate started to get more serious, she would begin occasionally halting chats to go talk to Jack. This would get on Nate's nerves, understandably, and it seemed like she was purposely trying to make him jealous. Then, in late May of 2001, Nate was finally able to see Jen in person. He was living in a bordering state, and he had friends heading towards Jen's slice of Oregon. So he seized the opportunity and hitched a ride with them so that he can go visit her. Nate's parents were very against this, but of course he went anyway. After an 8-hour road trip late at night, he finally arrives at 10 a.m. Jen comes out of the house, excited to finally meet Nate in person, and he gives her a gift. test tubes for role-playing. Nate notices a, quote, small booth with windows in it that Jen likely made for RPing scientist stuff. And given this photograph of her from the time, I guess this was her scientist era. Apparently, she was really into Lucretia from Final Fantasy VII around this time. Nate and Jen chat the whole day, and she's incredibly excited to see someone from the internet meet her in real life. It's like poetry, it's sort of a rhyme. Mona pulls Nate aside to talk to him, likely to make sure that he's there for the right reasons, if you know what I mean. She comes to the conclusion that he's a good guy and tells him he's a good influence on Jen. Later in the day, Jen and Nate go out on the town. They go to a mall where he buys her a crystal angel, and then she shows him the flower shop that she worked at. Oh, and that friend that drove Nate to the house in the first place, he's there for all of this, by the way. But anyway, they get home and Jen cooks Nate a romantic dinner. Steak, of course. The day was perfect, and neither wanted it to end. The friend goes to sleep, but Nate and Jen stay up well into the wee hours of the night, just talking. So excited to have each other's company. And then, kind of suddenly, Jen is like, I gotta go call Jack. And Nate is left confused. She goes to the landline and chats and chats and chats with Jack. Just the same she had with Nate. A little annoying, but once she got off the phone, the vibes continued. She told Nate how he's a reincarnation of Vincent Valentine from Final Fantasy VII, and Nate responds by saying he doesn't believe in any of that. It's that moment where, from Nate's perspective, it seemed like Jen lost all interest in him. Instantly. The vibes were just off, and combined with Nate being understandably jealous of Jack, the night's mood was no longer happy. And so they went to bed. The next morning, Jen takes Nate outside and breaks up with him. She says, I'm not really into you that way. The rest of the day, he was still there, and it was insanely awkward, especially since they had a perfectly fine day the day before. Nate ends up staying a day and a half to 2 days, including the drive back, and that was kind of it. He talks with her a few times after this, mostly calling her to talk with Mona, or her calling him to beg for money, but that's kind of where it all fizzled out. In the summer of 2001, Mona invites some painter guy to come live with her and Jen to help keep up with bills. Jen fucking hates this. I'm not sure if there's something going on with Mona and the painter, and this is a "you're not my real dad" kind of situation, but the painter guy encourages Jen to go to Pennsylvania to be with Jack, and to go off on her own, and that her mom was holding her back. And so she did just that. Mona wasn't sure where her daughter was going, but she was an adult, and she had a rough idea, only confirmed when she called Nate. Jen was going to Pennsylvania to be with Jack. She had previously called Nate, telling him that they weren't meant to be, and that he's still her Vincent Valentine, and that she's leaving for Penn to be with Jack, and that Nate should support her in all of this, and fucking give her money for this too. Charmin' lass. Jen gets a Greyhound and leaves Oregon for State College, Pennsylvania. Jack had sent her enough money for the ticket and some food, and the ride lasted about 5 days. I think the plan with Jack was the only visit for a summer break, but given the way she ended things with her mom, things got complicated. Also, Jen was lying to everyone that she'd come from California instead of Oregon to make herself seem more, I don't know, special? Famous? I have no clue, but whatever, worry about that stuff later. Right now, she's with Jack. Jen sends Nate a message telling him how she made it to Pennsylvania safely. He's pretty checked out at this point. Despite this, she continued to call him for quite a while after this, even when she began seeing other people. She'd ask him to buy her things and send money, etc. She even threatened suicide if he didn't send her money. He never complied, even just straight up telling her, do it. She put Jack in the line so he could tell him how she's really going to do it, and he wasn't having it.
When she started kind of getting onto that, I just said, do it. I don't care anymore. Just go ahead and do it. I'll listen to you. I'm on the phone with you right now. And then she'd put, Hojo on the line. Like, I don't want to talk to you, Renee. I don't know you. I don't care about you. You're the reason this whole thing started anyways. And she's like, well, she's really going to kill herself. And I said, Put her on the phone next to her. I'll listen to her while she does it. She's not going to do it. I don't believe any of that. She's self-centered enough. And this happened more than one time.
Anyway, that fun stuff aside, Jack calls up Marley so that they can meet Jen. And from Marley's perspective, she came out of nowhere. Here's this random online person they've never even heard of that's so close to Jack, and that she came cross-country to visit him. Not to mention they're dating at the time, and Marley had no clue. And so they make the drive to the college to meet Jen.
My first impression was of this awkward girl with huge eyes, like deer in headlights. She looked so nervous. I figured moving cross-country was pretty stressful, so at first I tried to be nice to her, especially since she was my good friend's girlfriend. She introduced herself with her actual name, and we went to their new apartment. I remember Jen gradually relaxing as she realized I'm a huge nerd and wasn't going to judge her for her interests. But even back then, she always seemed a little wary. Like she thought I was going to steal Jack from her. In the end, she was right. I wanted to, though not in the way she was thinking.
It didn't seem to them like Jen came with the intention of staying, as she came with very little and had no plans at all. At this point, Jen actually seemed pretty open and honest, never making up any outlandish stories about herself, just being a down-to-earth person. She made Jack very happy, so Marley made the effort to get to know her. Jen eventually opened up to Marley about her time at Cross Creek and the horrible things she was subjected to. According to Jen, she was sent to this reform school because she was caught having sex and her family was very strict about having sex. However, it didn't take very long for her story to change. Her story about her leaving California also changed. At first, it was that she had an abusive and controlling ex she had to escape. She held on to pictures of him and showed them off constantly. She used one picture in particular to seemingly use to make Jack feel like he needed to compete against him so she wouldn't move back home. As she got more social awards from being a victim, she brought up this ex more and more, and then even started talking about how he was attacking her with magic. Jen was still on good terms with her parents, not talking about how abusive they were or anything like that. She called them frequently. Eventually this all changed. By Marley's observation, she seemed to appropriate stories from others.
If, for example, someone were to talk about having a parent or an ex hit them, a week later Jen would be telling everyone the same thing about her parents or ex. It was like clockwork, and it would always be like, oh, she forgot about it because of the trauma, and now she remembered.
Marley grew very frustrated with Jen's obvious lies, especially as someone who had an abusive parent themselves. Despite this, Jen was part of the friend group now, and Marley tried their best to get along with her. However, one thing she wouldn't have any tolerance for is her manipulating their friends.
Jen would often tell Jack that he could never satisfy her because Jen was not a lesbian and Jack could never truly please her because he didn't have the right equipment to do so.
Because sex, to me, is unnecessary and useful only for breeding purposes.
She would moon over that photo of her abusive ex because he could satisfy her in ways she told Jack he never could. It's all really gross, but it worked how she wanted it to. Jack seemed to think that he was going to have to accept this male identity that was being pushed onto him. I'm obviously not saying that he would never have arrived there on his own, but more that he was pushed onto things much more quickly than the pace he was moving at before he met Jen. I think this was just part of her tactics towards undermining Jack's sense of self, forcing him to be what she wanted, making him feel insecure about their relationship. He wasn't ready to publicly be this person Jen wanted him to be, so he became more and more isolated.
On October 6th of 2001, a funny little incident had occurred. Jen, Jack, and another friend of theirs named Ibrahim were back behind the apartment building having a LARP sword fight that also involved the toy gun. A little girl walks by and sees one of them holding the toy gun. Thinking it was real, she tells her mother, who called the police after looking out her window and seeing someone firing a shot, then getting disarmed by the other two. 8 police officers show up after cutting through traffic of a nearby football game. They cuffed all 3 of them and had them on the ground. They were charged with terroristic threats, this was a month after 9/11, harassment, and recklessly endangering another person. Fucking insane. At the preliminary hearing, Jen apologized and received her toy swords and gun back. Their public defender argued that this was all a misunderstanding, and the judge agreed, dropping the charges. Shortly after, Ibrahim left the group. This whole incident is actually in the newspaper, and there was a real article about it. Here it is, from Center Daily in 2001. Only a few months after Jen's arrival in Pennsylvania, it was decided that she and Jack would have a marriage ceremony on October 30th via hand fasting. Theo had drawn up the wedding invitation, and Marley was to be Jack's best man. Before the wedding, they had a dual bachelor party at Hooters. The wedding itself was held in a building on the college campus at 11:30 at night. They couldn't legally get an official marriage certificate due to Jack's at the time female identity, and that gay marriage was not legal at this time in Pennsylvania. Despite this, a friend of a friend got ordained to perform the ceremony, and while it wasn't official, they were spiritually married. According to Marley's account, the ceremony was brief and nothing over the top like Jen would come to be known for. They and Jack wore cobbled together thrift store suits outside, and Jen wore, quote,
the same purple velvet 2-piece outfit she bought at Hot Topic and wore pretty much every day until it fell apart. It was this 2-piece crushed velvet thing, maxi skirt, and very late 90s Renaissance style top with bell sleeves. The top had some lace details to simulate a corset. She also got a flower crown from someone.
Sid and a few other friends were in attendance. Sid nearly broke his thumb sparring with Bokens, and another person had to go to the hospital after getting hit in the eye by one. After the main ceremony, there was a small reception. It was short-lived because Jen started getting handsy with Jack. It is to be noted that Jack was usually pushed by her to do more in public than he was comfortable with. Someone gave them a ride home, and I'm pretty sure they gave each other a ride. Anyway, Jen was increasingly pushing Jack's boundaries when it came to PDA. When other people would walk by, she'd make out with him and shove her hand down his shirt, for example. Despite this, Jen constantly denied being a lesbian. She seemingly only acted like she was for the social points whenever applicable, but then went back to being publicly straight whenever that suited her better socially, which unfortunately back then was most of the time. She would also constantly shame Jack for not having the right equipment.
Because sex, to me, is unnecessary and useful only for breeding purposes.
And never being able to satisfy her, no doubt adding to his depression about his gender identity. Jack still attended Penn State and worked part-time at the school itself with Marley. He seemingly left, got fired, or cut his hours, and would do this at a few different jobs, all to give Jen attention. She'd even refuse to let him leave the house. Not relevant really, but super fucking interesting. Marley, Jack, and Jen were among the first group of Penn State's Paranormal Research Society, a club dedicated to, well, researching paranormal activities. This group got a reality TV show in 2007 called Paranormal State, and were actually relatively well known. Marley quit after the first meeting because the founder claimed to be possessed by a demon, started talking in a deep voice, and then threatened to kill them that night. Another non sequitur, there was an incident where Jen stole something from one of Marley's friends. She lied about this for months, and Marley never believed her, siding with their friend. They tried to get it back for them for months until the friend just gave up. Besides this, Jen also shoplifted, but as far as Marley knew, there were no other incidents of her stealing from individuals at that time. And that brings us back to late 2001. Jack makes contact with Icarus and invites him to meet his wife, as wives are nice people. Wasn't that cool? I did like a little prequel thing. And for the next part, I'll be doing a bit of a sequel thing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I've been Sprited. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you disliked it, leave a dislike. You got something to say? Please leave a comment. And if you want to be notified when the next episode comes out, go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell notification if you want to get a notification for it. I got a second channel called Spreaded's Dumping Ground where I just dump shit out. A Patreon for $1 a month, you can get stuff like early access to videos and like development updates and scripts and all shit like that. But if you'd like to support the channel, I'd appreciate that. But you are under no obligation to do so, and I will never make videos exclusively for Patreon. It's just if you want to help prolong my existence on this platform, I guess. I don't know. I got a Twitter at SuperSpreaded64. Sometimes I post art there. And I have a webcomic called Alfie Once and Future you can read on Webtoon. And now I have a little portfolio site. It's on Card. I don't remember the exact URL. It's like Zach Woolery at Card or something like that. It'll be on screen. That's all I can think of. So thank you to Becklaham and Ross Redman for helping me with voices.
And Mushroom Monty.
Thank you for the memory slot, for like assets and whatnot. Thank you to Cayla from the Human Exception Podcast for being just an excellent help on this script. Thank you to Nate for letting me interview him and get some extra details. Yeah, thank you to r/Tattlecrime, the Discord server. Just everyone, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your patience. And yeah, thank you for watching.